So I'll be talking about the lazy bird nesting in France, and I would like to give you some insights from the French Volunteers Network and the way we are trying to preserve the Montagu area in farming landscapes in France. So that's a talk by a group of people, obviously not only me, but Jean-Luc Bourriou in particular, Thierry Printemps, and Benoît Van Eyck. Yeah, so I'd like to start with a brief history of the network. So the things started in 1975, so more than 40 years back now, where the first people in the northeast of the country realized that some Montagu harrier were actually nesting in cereals and not only in natural habitats. And they also realized that in some nests, the chicks did not fledge before harvesting took place. So they started to discuss with farmers the way they could preserve the nest in this kind of landscape. Very rapidly, the network of volunteers grows throughout the country, and by 1985, we recorded the first years with more than 1,000 nests of Montagu harriers monitored for conservation, and they were monitored by about between 300 and 500 volunteers. By the end of the 1980s, the first programs of wing tagging, of adult wing tagging, started in 5 different sites. So between 1988 and 1995, in order to estimate survival and breeding dispersal, and also the likelihood of the switch from natural habitat to cereal habitats, especially in the western part of the country. 2 of them are still active, especially one held by Thierry Printemps. One of his bird tagged here on this picture, and you recognize the type of wing tags that Dominique is also using in Poland. Then at the end of my PhD in 2007, we launched a big wing tagging program of juveniles over the whole country. It lasted for 4 years. We tagged, so between 2007 and 2010, we tagged a bit more than 5,500 chicks over the whole distribution of the species in the country. And it was mostly to investigate juvenile dispersal at a large spatial scale. And then 2019, with the COVID-19 sanitary crisis that hit quite hard France, and we managed, with the support of the LPO, the French BirdLife partner, we managed to make recognized harrier protection, to make recognized by the government the harrier protection as being in the general interest for the country. So the government granted 165 volunteers with a derogation during the spring lockdown for actually searching nests, which was very useful because we had quite a lot of pairs breeding in that year, and most of them required protection from harvesting. So obviously, protection from harvesting did not take place in early spring, but it's a crucial time for searching and finding nests, as all of you know. So what about the population size in France and its distribution, the distribution of Montagu harriers? A national raptor breeding survey has been conducted in over 3 years, in 2000 and 2002. The estimate at that time was roughly 4,000 pairs. And you can see the distribution of this on this map. So the darker the blue, the higher the density of Montagu harriers, with the 3 different parts in this distribution. The highest densities of nests can be found in the central western part of the country. Then there is also another hotspot of distribution in the northeast, but with the lower densities, and then a third part of distribution in the southern part of the country, with a mix between actually between birds breeding in natural habitat, especially scrubland alongside the Mediterranean coast, and cereals and fodder. For the rest of the country, it's most of the nests. When I mean most of the nests, it's more than 90% are found in wheat and winter barley. Overall, at the national level, we estimate that more than 80% of the nests are actually built in cereals. We conducted a survey dedicated to harriers in 2010 and 2011, and we were able to actually estimate the trend of the population on a subsample of 250 squares. So squares that were monitored both in 2000 and in 2011. And we detected a negative trend of minus 14%, which was not significant. But if we derive from that difference the annual population growth rate, it's about 0.98, in between 0.98 and 0.99. And if we apply this annual population growth rate until now, we may have currently about 3,000 breeding pairs of Montagu harriers in France. And we are currently running a new harrier survey. We started it in 2019, and the second year was supposed to be this year, but obviously we couldn't manage to run it. And we are hoping that the volunteers are still motivated to finish this survey next year, and we hopefully will have a new estimate for the country in 2021. So what is the extent of protection in our country? Since 2007, all the nests found in France are gathered into a national database. So I will be presenting the data from 2007 onwards. So over the last 13 years, so in between 2007 and 2019, about 13,000 Montagu nests have been monitored. So it's in average fairly easy to calculate. It's 1,000 nests per year. And as you can see, there are years where less than 700 nests are found, and in good vol years, we have up to 1,200 nests which are monitored by, once again, about 400 people. Over the last years, we had three particularly bad vol years on the row, so bad years for harriers. And the numbers of nests for 2019 is not consolidated yet, and we are actually above 1,000 nests. And in 2020, we have not gathered all the nests yet in the database, but we are well above, once again, well above 1,000 nests. We had, after 3 bad years, 2016, 2017, 2018, we had 2 good vol years on the row, and the breeding success was quite high too. So in addition to the Montagu harrier nest, the network is also monitoring about 300 nests of hen harriers per year and 100 nests of marsh harriers per year over the last 10 years. So in terms of number of fledglings, so the network monitor slightly more than 23,000 chicks over the last 13 years, so since 2007. And on the bar, you can see the number of fledglings for each year. So in good vol years, we had more than 2,000 chicks fledged per 2,000 chicks fledged. And in bad vol years, and especially 2013, we had a bit less than 1,000 chicks in that particularly bad vol year. The proportion above the bar are represent the proportion of chicks that need protection for fledging. So in total, over the 13 years of the study, more than 60% of the chicks actually needed intervention for fledging. And this, what is striking too is that this proportion is increasing over the time. And if we had 2020, we are more or less around 70 or 80% of the chicks that need to be protected from harvesting. So the proportion is high and the proportion is increasing. So what kind of protection is that used in our country? Well, that's mostly in situ protection. Only a small part of the chicks are actually translocated to a bird rescue center. And we are using a fence buffer of 1 by 1 meter. The bottom of the buffer is fenced too. So if I can show you quickly what it looks like, but maybe some of you are already using this kind of techniques. So it's just a square of wood of 1 meter by 1 meter with a fence. And the crucial point is that the bottom of the square is also fenced to prevent badgers or foxes to dig underneath the cage. So it's fairly easy to move. When it's folded, you can pile up into your barn, and you can store easily 10 or 20 into your barn. It doesn't take a lot of place. It's fairly easy to install. Actually, it can be done by only one guy. So you have to remove the nest first and the vegetation on the ground on a 1 square meter, and then you put your cage, so you can see the fence in between the wellies. The chicks are there, and then you rebuild the nest inside the buffer, and it looks like, well, nothing has changed for the female. So it's very efficient. You can do it by yourself. It's about, when you are experienced, it's less than 15 minutes to set the protection around the nest. If I'm going back to the slideshow. So as in the Netherlands, we do not pay farmers for that. We collaborate with them, and it's actually the relationship with farmers is getting better and better every year. So that's good news. The new generation is welcoming harriers much more than the older generation. So it looks like that after harvesting. So, but does it work? So we took advantage of the national database to estimate that, and yes, well, it does work quite well. Here is the number of fledglings per nest according to different type of protection, and you can see that nests protected by a fence buffer in cereals, the black bars, have higher productivity than unprotected nests, much higher productivity. So this technique is also easily accepted by farmers. It's very small. They can move it actually during the harvesting. We translocate some of the nest. It improves the productivity when harvesting occurs very early during the chick stage. Especially, we are moving nests that are built in barley, such that the nest is not in an open area for too long. So fence nests show higher productivity than nests, mostly because of course they reduce predation, and even in this simplified landscape like cereal landscape in France, predators like foxes and badgers are coming back, and they are imposing to harriers quite a high predation rate if you don't protect the nest. Some elements of demography. So in terms of fecundity, so here are the annual variation in the 3 different parts of the countries, western, northeast, and southern part of the country in terms of mean number of fledglings per nest. So in average, over the whole country, the average is 1.8 fledgling per nest. And it varies from south to north, with a higher reproductive success occurring in northeast. Whereas the higher densities of harriers' nest, I told you, you can find it in the central western part of the country, but here the productivity is a bit lower, possibly because of density dependence. The proportion of fledglings that are saved is also increasing from south to north. So from roughly 50% to up to 70% in the northern part of the country. So 70% of the chicks fledged there thanks to human intervention. Otherwise, they would be harvested. We investigated adult survival rate. So we estimated from long-term adult wing tagging study. Adult survival rate in France average 0.76 over the last 20 years. It was much lower during the 80s. It was as low as 0.66. But during the 1980s, there were very frequent drought years in the Sahel region where they winter, and that's reduced survival rates. And now the situation in the Sahel is a bit better in terms of rainfall, at least, and the survival are quite high. We didn't find any difference between male and female survival rates, but what we found is that the annual survival rate of adults was fairly constant regarding environmental conditions in either breeding season or winter season, except in years where the environmental conditions were bad both in the breeding season and during the winter season. So that means where breeding success was low and there was also low level of rainfall in the winter quarters. In that poor years, in the two kind of environments they live in, you can see a drop in adult survival rate with the average value for that kind of year as low as 50%. We found a slightly different picture for juvenile survival. Juvenile survival average 0.35. It was estimated on over 12 years, so mostly during the 90s. And we found that juvenile apparent survival was increasing was better in years with higher rainfall in Sahel. That was the main effect. But also there was an additive effect of vole years, but surprisingly with lower juvenile survival following years with higher vole abundance in the birth year. So suggesting again an effect of density dependence. We also, so just quickly some results about the wing tagging program. So we tagged more than 5,000 chicks with a different type of tags. You can see a brood of 5 chicks with the wing tags on them. We collected quite a lot of resightings for those birds. We collected, we observed at least 1,500 birds after 1 year or more, and we collected 500 data of juvenile dispersal, that means distance between the birth nest and recorded breeding until last year. Can go a bit quickly. So in terms of Natal dispersal, 10% of birds are actually nesting very close to their birthplace, less than 3 kilometers apart. It's as close as 1.6 kilometers for males. And when you look at the median dispersal distance for females, it's about 20 kilometers. So that means that 50% of the female Montagu harriers came back to breed within 22 kilometers of their birthplace, and it's down to 12 kilometers for males. Actually, we calculated a correction for that kind of dispersal distance because it's we underestimate because of the spatial heterogeneity in resighting efforts across space. So when we apply the correction, we estimated that the median dispersal distance was 32 kilometers for males and 54 kilometers for females. So quite large-scale dispersal. So what's next? So based on this on these results on the different elements of demography, we are trying to build a spatially explicit population viability analysis mostly to answer these two questions. Is the current nest protection effort in France enough to maintain a stable population? And if not, what kind of increase of this protection we could make to make this population stable? And we also want to build different scenarios of alternative conservation measures, such as testing the proportion of set aside as the one described by Almut earlier, and especially not only for food but also for nest location, and to what extent this could improve the viability of this conservation reliant species. And just to finish up, we are not working only on Montagu harriers, we are also working on harriers. So because France is hosting the largest population in Europe, with at least, as it was estimated in 2002, 8,000 pairs. But with the same kind of census we did for Montagu harriers, we detected a 50% decrease between 2001 and 2011 for hen harriers. And only 300 nests of hen harriers are monitored every year, because most volunteers consider this species as being less at risk from harvesting than Montagu harriers. But actually, in my study area this year, where we actually manage most of the hen harriers in France, out of the 170 nests, we found more than 100 required protection from harvesting. So more than 60%, so almost as high as Montagu harriers. So we definitely need to do more work on this species. Thank you very much.